So in the last lesson, I taught you basically the operators in Python, but the two types of operators that I want you to remember right now are the comparison operators and the logical operators, right? So the comparison, you can basically compare two pieces of data, and see if they are equals than, different than, greater than, less than, greater or equals to, less or equals to. All of these comparisons are going to return true or false, right? Pretty basic. The logical operators, you can do pretty the same thing, but with multiple comparisons. So you can compare one situation, then you can compare another, and if both are true, you get the return true. If one of them are not true, you get the return false. If you use the AND logical operator, and if you use the OR logical operator, if one of the comparisons that you are performing are false, no problem. If only one is true, the final return is going to be true, all right? If you don't remember these rules, I recommend you to take a look again in the last lesson, because today we are going to see the conditions in Python. And basically the conditions are what you do based on the return of a comparison, right? If you compare something, it is going to return if it's true or false. And based on this result, what do you do? We use conditions to perform things based on these comparisons. So it's essential for you to remember how the comparison operators and the logical operators work, okay? Let's create our new file here. Let's call them conditions.py. Let's call it conditions.py, and let's put here the three types of conditional statements that we are going to use. The first one is if, the second one is the elif, and the third is the else. Okay, so let's start with the if statement. So the name says everything, right? If something is true, you can do something. Pretty intuitive, okay? So let's see an example here. Name Felipe. Let's expand this a little bit. Okay, name Felipe. Age 30. Driver's license. I guess that's how you write it. True. Felipe has. Let's put has driver's license. Why did I type my age as a string? I don't know. Let's correct this. Okay, so we have a string, an integer, a boolean. Let's use here surname. Let's use surname to play with this, all right? So these are the data that we're going to use in these comparisons. Let's check if Felipe is of legal age, right? Here in Brazil, the legal age is 18. So age greater equals than 18. When you do this, you're basically comparing. And as you know how this works, you probably noticed that this is going to return true, right? Because the age is here, 30. We are comparing this data with this data if this is greater or equals than 18, and it is, right? So this is going to return true, all right? But what if I wanted to do something based on that? I would use the statement if. So if this condition is true, I can put colon here and hit enter, all right? When I hit enter, you're gonna see that my cursor is not here in the beginning of the line. When I hit enter, it automatically goes to, like, not exactly in the middle of the line, but it goes a little bit to the right? This is indentation. In Python, when you want to write something inside another code, you use the indentation. So you saw that Visual Code, when I hit enter, it automatically puts this space here for me. This is basically the same thing that I press the tab key in my keyboard, right? If I press tab, it jumps a little bit to the right, okay? So what can I do here? I can print, for example, name is can drive, right? Because this person age, because this person's age is greater or equals than 18, right? So if this condition is true, do what's inside of this block. What's inside of this block? I'm just printing name can drive, right? So let's run the file conditions and we can see that Felipe can drive. Let's clean my terminal here again. Felipe can drive, okay? So basically this is what happens when you use the if statement. You compare something and you print and you do anything you want to do inside of this block. But remember, this is only going to work if the condition is true, okay? If I change my age here, for example, to 15, this is not going to return true anymore. So this is not going to happen, right? Let's test. See, nothing happens because this is not true. So this part of the code is only going to be executed if this condition is true, okay? That's how it works. Remember that. Now you are starting to work with code that does not run specifically in the line by line order. When you put something like this in your code, this code is not going to run if this condition is not true, right? So from now on, you have more control of what to do, because now you know how to compare and evaluate if the result is true to do something based on that, okay? That's how the if statement works. All right, now you know that this is only going to be executed if this comparison returns true. You are ready to understand how this statement elif works, all right? And basically elif stands for else if. So if this is true, do this. If this is not true, nothing happens, right? But if we type elif colon and hit enter, and in this case press tab, we can do another thing here, all right, based in another condition. So between the elif and the colon, the same way that it is in between if and colon, we can write another condition. So this condition here basically evaluates if the age of the person is greater or equals to 18 to decide if the person can drive, all right? But if the person is not older than 18, but this person has a driver's license because this person was emancipated, for example, the parents assigned a document that allows this person to drive even if this person is a minor, right? It happens. Here in Brazil, it happens. I don't know if this happens for driving, but anyway, in some country, it happens, all right? So let's put some data here to use emancipated, and I guess that's how you say this in English, but I think you are getting what I'm trying to say here. Emancipated, true. Is emancipated. Let's improve this, all right? Yes, it is. So we can check this option. Is emancipated. And as I taught you in the last lesson, when you compare something, if the data is Boolean, you don't need to do like this, equals true, you know? If you only put the variable or the constant that is a Boolean, it's like it's implicit, okay? So you don't need to change, so you don't need to write the comparison explicitly. All right, so if it's emancipated, you can drive. All right, let's print and see what happens. Now you can see that Felipe can drive, but Felipe is 15. Felipe is not older than 18. Okay, but we tried to evaluate this. This was false, but right after we went out, this happens. It evaluates this. Let's try some debugging here to see what happens. So let me add the breakpoint. In fact, I'm adding the breakpoint here. F5, Python debugger, Python file. Let's wait for our debugging to start. So I just added the breakpoint. We can see that it stopped here, right? So let's step over. It is evaluating. The age is 15. You can see that when you debug with variables and constants, it shows us here the real value. So right besides the condition, we have the real value. Age is 15, right? So let's jump. It basically skipped the line 10, right? Because this returned false. And if this returns false, what's inside of this block is not going to run, right? It's going to be ignored. So it was ignored. We went to the line 11, and here we are checking if this person is emancipated. And if it is, we are going to print here. And remember, if it is basically is emancipated equals true. But as we know, when we are evaluating booleans, we don't need to check explicitly, if it is equals true. We can just put the data, all right, and implicitly it evaluates if it's equals true. All right, so let's step over, and you're going to see that it is going to run the code that is inside of this block, because it returned true. All right, and it's going to print. Okay, so that's how the elif, that stands for else if statement, works. All right, so now you know how the if statement and the elif statement works. Let's jump to our next statement, that is the else. And this is pretty simple, right? The else is used to perform what you want to perform if neither of the previous conditions were true, right? And nothing happened. So if this condition is not true, this is not happening. Else if, let's check this condition, if it's not true, this is not gonna happen also, right? So what can we do? If we don't use the else, nothing is gonna happen. So nothing is going to be returned, right? It's going to be like without an ending, right? Let's change the is emancipated to false, and if we run this, we can see that nothing happens because it checked here, it's false, so we didn't print this. It checked this, it is also false, so it didn't print this, but nothing happens. So if neither one of the previous conditions were true, what should happen now? Probably print that the person can't drive, right? So else, and we put colon here. We are not going to write any comparison because it's the last resort. So we put here print name can't drive. All right, let's run, and now we see Felipe can't drive. So let's change some data here for us to see how it works. So if the age is 20, what happens? Felipe can drive because this is true. Felipe can drive. So what if Felipe is 16? Felipe can't drive. You see that it basically ignores this. It evaluates this. Is Felipe older than 18? No, because he is 16. It evaluates this. Is Felipe emancipated? Let's see. No, he's not. So it goes like this. Print can drive. Can't drive. All right. What if we change this to true? Now Felipe is emancipated. Felipe can drive now, even if it is 16, even if this condition is false, because this is true. All right, that's how the else statement complements your decision-making structure. So with these three basic keywords in Python, if, elif, and else, you can create decision-making flows based on comparisons using int data, using Boolean data. You can even use like text data. Let's play a little bit with this situation. Now we are going to jump into conditions that uses more than one comparisons, right? Stick with me because it's going to be a little bit more complex, but it's going to be worth it. You are going to see in your life as a programmer some situations where you cannot use one comparison to make a decision. You must use many comparisons. In this case, we are checking if the age of this person is greater or equals than 18 to decide if this person can drive, right? And if the person is not older than 18, we check another thing, that if this person is emancipated. Even if this person not being older than 18, if this person is emancipated, the person can drive, okay? And only if these two conditions are false, then we tell that the person cannot drive. But this is one of the situations where we don't make a good decision based only in one comparison, right? For example, the person can be older than 18, the person can be emancipated, but what if this person, even being older than 18 and being emancipated, doesn't have a driver's license? This person cannot drive if this person matches the age requisite but not matches the most important requisite, that is having a freaking driver's license, you know. So we have here that this data has driver's license, true, but we are not using this data in these comparisons, right? So we must use, and in this case we can use the AND logical operator. So this is basically a decision making structure that uses more than one condition to decide if the person can do something, right, in this situation, right? So AND has driver's license. In this case, now we have a good comparison. Let's clean this terminal. Let's run this file, and Felipe can drive. So let's see here. Felipe is 16, Felipe is emancipated, and Felipe has a driver's license. So probably this scenario is false, right? Because Felipe is not older or equals to 18, even having a driver's license, but is emancipated, right? Let's change here. For example, now Felipe is of legal age, normal. Felipe is not emancipated, but Felipe doesn't have a driver's license. Let's see what happens. Felipe cannot drive. Alright? So you can use the AND logical operator in your if statements to improve your comparisons, right? So you compare one thing and another. If both are true, you return true. In this case, this is false. This is true, but this is false. So immediately evaluates this and see that this is true, but this is false. So it goes to the else block. All right? Pretty simple, but you can also do it with the OR logical operator. So Let's add a third comparison here. So, or surname equals to Matos, because the Matos family is like the family that runs that town. So everyone that is part of this family can do what they want above the law, you know? Hypothetically speaking, obviously. I don't have this kind of power. But anyway, let's evaluate this OR operation here. So let's see what happens now. Let's see what happens now. Felipe can drive magically, even not having a driver's license. Yes, because this returns false, but we have put here the OR logical operator that allows us to return true if one of the comparisons are true. So this comparison here is true. The surname is Matos. What if this guy was Felipe Silva, for example? Now Felipe cannot drive. That's unfair, right? But that's how the world works. Anyway, so I hope you understood how these multiple comparisons into the if statement works. All right, because now we are going to dive in to the nested if statements. Get ready. Now let's finish this lesson with the nested if statements, right? Most developers that struggle with nested if statements struggle because they don't use the debug tool, right? So I have already showed you how to debug line by line, how to control your execution flow. So now it's the time where you use it, okay? Because if you don't, you are going to struggle. So basically we have here an if statement with 3 comparisons. Let's take this OR comparison out of here to make easier for you to understand the nested if, right? So now we have this condition: if the person is older than 18 and has a driver's license, the person can drive. Simple as that, right? But life is not simple as that. It's not only basically 2 criteria that defines if something can be done or not. In general, it's like a group of criteria, right? Especially in programming, right? So life's not that easy. If it was that easy, anyone would be a good programmer. All right. So in this case, let's add some complexity here. So what about these 2 criteria being older than 18 and having a driver's license would be only the entry point of our analysis. So if the person meets these 2 criteria, we are going to ask the person to type its driver's license. All right, so input type, please type your DL number, right? So if the person is 18 years old or older and has a driver's license, we are not telling that the person can drive. We are asking the person to type the number of its driver's license. And we are going to get this number and store it into a variable. So DL number receives the result of this, right? So the person is going to type, we are going to store temporarily here, and instead of telling that the person can drive, we are going to perform another if statement here to check if this driver's license number that the person typed is valid. Make sense? Right? So ask the person the driver's license number. Here we are going to validate if, check in case it's better, check if the drivers, the DLs is valid. So let's pretend that valid driver's licenses have 7 digits. Okay, so if we want to discover how many digits some string have, how many characters in this case a string has, we can use the function len. Alright, so len, we can pass as a parameter the variable that has the data, so DL number. So basically this returns the amount of characters that this data has. So we hypothetically are validating, right? So we are pretending that a valid driver's license has 7 characters. So if the return of this, that is basically the number of characters that this data has, is equals to 7, now we can here print that the person can drive. Alright, so name can drive. Else print your DL looks fake. Alright, so this is not a how do I say, business rule. This is not a true validation rule. Alright, I don't know how to validate a driver's license basically, okay, but let's pretend that valid driver's licenses have 7 digits. Okay, so if len DL number is equals to 7, if the amount of characters of these data that the user inputted here is equal 7, the person can drive, because we assume that it has a valid driver's license. But if it doesn't have this amount of characters, we're going to say that it looks fake. Okay, so let's save it, let's run, and Felipe can't drive. Why? Let's see the data. So Felipe doesn't have a driver's license. So let's put true here. Now Felipe has a driver's license. Let's see what happens. So it already passes here and asked us to type the driver's license. So let's type. My driver's license is 1223-ABC. Let's see if I can drive. Felipe can drive. Let's do it again. Please type, oh, my driver's license is blah blah blah. UDL looks fake. So that's the power of a nested if. And we could improve this. We could put another if inside of this. So for example, what is the expiration year of the driver's license? DL expires at 2026. Let's see this. Let's put another if here. So we are going to check if the DL is not expired. So if DL expires at what year we are now? 2026. So expires if the expiration date is greater or equals than 2026, we can print name can drive. Alright, forgot to put colon here. So if the expiration year is greater or equals than these years, it means that it's not expired, right? So the person can drive. But let's put else here and print your DL is expired, right? You can see that we have three ifs, one inside the other and the other inside of the other. This is basically the nested if structure. Alright, so let's run, let's see what happens. Please type your DL 123-ABC. Felipe can drive because the expiration date of my driver's license is equals 2026, right? But what if my expiration date was 6 years ago? Let's see what happens. Type your DL number 123-ABC. Your DL is expired. Can you see this? So basically, that's how nested ifs work. Remember, here in this nested if, I'm only using one criteria, but I could use many ones. Inside of this, I could use many ones. I could use, in fact, instead of two if else's, I could take this off and put both criteria here. You know, like expires at here, using and. Can you see this? Let's erase this. So my code now is shorter. I'm evaluating both. So my driver's license number must be valid, and also the expiration date must be greater than this year for me to be able to drive. This is another way to expressing this logic, but all of these are hypothetical, right? When you are writing code, you need to understand the rules and the flows to write them. But here I'm showing you how to use the nested ifs. Alright, so to finish this, let's try again. What's my DL number? 123 slash ABC. Your DL looks fake. Why does my DL look fake? Let's see. So 123 ABC. In this case, we have a problem because I'm evaluating the two conditions and the else is global for the both of them. So doesn't make any sense, this error, this else, because it only went to this else because of the condition that is related to the expiration date and not this right here. So I must change this. So just you can't drive, right? So in this case, please type your DL number 123 ABC. You can't drive. Why? My driver's license has 7 digits. Okay, but it's expired. Okay, so these are some examples. Put this in practice and let's go to the next lesson. That's it for today. These are some of the real interviews that I recorded to show you how real companies interview developers from inside. Use them to prepare for real interviews and get the job of your dreams. Go to marosacademy.com or click the link below.